So we've looked at the VLAN implementation logic. We've looked at how that actually gets set up. We need to take a look at the implementation of our VLANs. I've taken the standard configuration that we've been using recently and added a couple more devices in here. I added a PC and a server, and I'm going to set them up with separate functionality. Like, we've taken our switch, which is just our normal engineering subnet, and we realized we had a couple people from HR that were going to move into cubes that were plugged into the same switch in the closet. I want to make sure that I can isolate that traffic. As it stands, I've got a logical diagram showing that HR and engineering are separate, but the switch hasn't been configured at all for that. So right now they're all in the same broadcast domain. I've allocated out the 192.168.50 subnet for these devices, but as it stands, without doing something to isolate them, it's the same broadcast domain. I can't really make that work successfully. You can. I mean, I could assign those addresses and put everything work, but I wouldn't be routing through them. And if I just assign them addresses and I somehow make my router work this way, because they're in the same broadcast domain, a user in the engineering side who may have administrative privileges could just give themselves an address on the 50 network and talk to them. I really want to have it isolated through this switch. So what we need to do is we need to go into the switch and then create the VLAN. So I want to go in and create a VLAN. And then I want to potentially assign the ports to the appropriate VLAN. So what I have here is I have PC2 and server 1 hanging off of switch 2, and I'm going to assign those ports to the appropriate VLANs. What I have is, this is port 1, FA01 up here. So again, this is FA01, this is FA02, this would be FA03 and 4, and then this is FA05. So we jump into the switch. We jump into the switch, take a look at enable password is Cisco, show interface IPint brief. This will at least show me which ones are up and down. So I see that, in fact, switch port 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 are up and up. So those are the 5 switch ports that we have running. Ports 6 through 24 are actually down. They're not administratively down. So again, best security practice is to go in and actually disable those ports as well. So probably we'll jump in to make sure that's taken care of. So I will go into conft interface range FA0/6 through 24, shut down. Again, for our best practice to make sure everything looks right, I should see no little red blinkies on my diagram, and I don't. Things still look great here. So we have VLAN, engineering VLAN, which is on the 30 network and the 50 network. So we need to create 2 different VLANs. Now I put them on the 30 and the 50 network. That does not mean we have to create VLAN 30 and VLAN 50. However, for the sake of convenience, which is typically what you see, we're going to use the same VLAN number as the subnet number. So I need to create those 2 VLANs, assuming they don't exist. Well, we probably don't want to assume anything, correct? So let's take a look. If we just do show VLAN from my switch interface, it actually shows me which VLANs I have and which ports are associated with them. So right now, I only have one VLAN, VLAN 1, and by default, all my ports are in VLAN 1. In the VLAN infrastructure, the way that it's put together, we do have a series of reserved VLANs up here, 1002, 3, 4, and 5. This is for FDDI and Token Ring. This is for their network and their structure. So we don't use them. If you're not using FDDI, which is Fiber Data Distributed Interface, or Token Ring as technologies, then you won't be using those upper level VLANs. So we don't have any defined, just what the default is here. So what I want to do is create VLAN 30. So how do I create VLAN 30? Conft VLAN 30. Pretty straightforward. I now have VLAN 30 defined. There are some configuration parameters here, not too much. What can I do? I could add a name to it. So that's what we'll do. Who was VLAN 30? Those were my engineers. Those are my engineers. So I will name it. ENG. Get out of there, do a show VLAN, and we can now see that I actually have two VLANs. I have VLAN 1, which is default, which has all the ports in it right now, but I do have a VLAN called engineering, which is VLAN 30. VLAN 30, let's see, this is port, let's just check and make sure the ports are accurate. This is port FA0, 2, and 5, so 2 and 5 need to belong to VLAN 30. I go back into my switch. I would say interface after conf T, interface FA0. You'd think I'd remember, wouldn't you? 2 and 5. FA0, 2. And I'm going to say switch port mode. I'm going to make it an access port. I want to just hard code it. I know I've got a PC plugged into it. I don't really care. And I'm going to say switch port access VLAN 30 and associate that port to VLAN 30. Now we also had interface FA05. So interface FA05, switch port mode access. Don't need to do this. It's just one of those things that I do if I know that I have a PC plugged in. I don't want someone negotiating it. It's a security thing. You say, well, you got a PC plugged into that switch port. What's the odds of that thing's going to, go ahead and dynamically request to be a trunk? It shouldn't. But it's entirely possible that a user could install router software on their machine and could negotiate a trunk to try to do what we call VLAN hopping. I don't want that to happen. So if I know a PC is plugged in, I'm going to enforce it as setting it directly for access mode. I want to change that to VLAN 30, so it's switch port access VLAN 30. Come out of there, save that, do show VLAN, and now I can see that I do in fact still have VLAN 30 built. It's FA02 through FA05, and we're in pretty decent shape here. Those two ports are now associated, and I don't have any display that shows me that outside of looking at the structure here. If you notice the little salmon colored LED that was just going on there that disappeared, that was spanning tree protocol, making sure that we didn't do something silly like plug in a redundant link someplace. And when you first fire up packet trace, you'll see that all the switch ports go into that listening learning state for spanning tree protocol before they come online, just to make sure that we're not creating some sort of a problem in my infrastructure. So that will take care of setting up the VLAN, creating the VLAN for VLAN 30. I still need to create VLAN 50 over here. So as an alternative to what we did in the first place, if we look at our ports, just to make sure that it should be 3 and 4, and they are 3 and 4. So ports 3 and 4 need to be in VLAN 50. If I go back to my switch, now I don't have a VLAN 50, and I haven't created one here somehow by the magic of TV, show VLAN. I still only have VLAN 30. If I jump to interface, interface FA03, and I say switch port mode access, and then switch port access VLAN 20, up 30, up 50. Notice it comes up and says, access did not exist, creating. So I did not need to go in specifically and create it, although I may do that ahead of time. I don't need to do that, but I can. But now that I've associated port 50 with VLAN 50, do show run, you can actually see there's ports 2 was VLAN 30, and 5 was VLAN 30, and 3 is VLAN 50, so VLAN 50 exists. And if I do show VLAN, I now have 50. I didn't give it a name yet, so I have to go into that create VLAN to give it a name, but it did actually get created for me. So again, if I want to, now I'm mad it doesn't have the name. I want to have the name HR. So VLAN 50, VLAN 50, name HR. I can name it after the fact. We're perfectly fine. Show VLAN, and now my 50 has the name HR. It only has port FA03 in it. I need 4 in there as well. We should have done it while we were there, but no big deal. We'll do interface FA04, interface FA04, and I will do switch port access. Well, let's do switch port mode first. Switch port mode access. Just to stay consistent, switch port access VLAN 50. And now those 2 switch ports are in the appropriate VLAN. Show VLAN. I now have 50 and 30 created. Ports FA02 and FA05 are in VLAN 30. Ports FA03 and FA04 are in VLAN 50. Exactly what we need for those 2 devices. So that gets our switch configuration up and running. One more thing I could point out to you quickly here, show run. Again, if I do my show run and I look at all my interfaces, we can see the configuration that we just put on. Switch port access VLAN 30 on FA02, FA03 is an access on VLAN 50, 4 is access on VLAN 50, 5 is access on VLAN 30. Where does it show in my running config that I named my VLAN HR and I named my VLAN engineering? I don't see it in here anywhere, and neither do you, even if you look carefully. We can go down very slowly. It's actually not here. So it knows, somehow the router knows, the switch knows that it's there. How does it know that? There's a separate file for the configuration of the VLANs. Now the configuration of the VLANs on the ports is in running config, but the VLANs themselves that they're created are in a different database file called vlan.dat. If I show flash, which is the hard drive structure of my switch, we can actually see a file in there named vlan.dat. That file actually has the VLANs that exist on this machine and what their names are. Again, if I were to arbitrarily go in here and create one more VLAN, let's go VLAN 100. We'll create VLAN 100. We'll name it test VLAN. Name test VLAN. If I do show VLAN, we see it. There it is, test VLAN. However, that's not associated with any ports. You can't find show run. You can't find those words VLAN 50, 100 or test VLAN in here anywhere. It is only in vlan.dat. So the creation or the existence of VLANs live in vlan.dat. Their association to ports live in the running config.